friends. Welcome back to Heartbeat Narratives. My name is Molly and I'm your host. And I've been looking forward to this episode. Our guest today is Devi Sakti, who I recently met through yoga because I came to 2 of your yoga classes, was completely obsessed, and the way you were speaking about the practice itself was so intentional and so beautiful that I felt very inclined to connect with you. So mahalo nui for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly honored to be here and so glad that yoga brought us together.
It feels really aligned. When I was in your class, this is probably January, I think, you were speaking to the concept of joy in yoga so eloquently, but rooted in a really tangible, fun, playful, balanced physical practice. And your sincerity for yoga, sincerity for Sanskrit, and everything you were teaching throughout the class felt like, how could I not invite you on the podcast? So I was like, okay, I'm going to be that weird student after class who goes up to you and makes small talk. But just thank you for teaching the way that you do.
Oh, I mean, that was one of the best interactions I've had at post-yoga class. It's normally like, hey, was that okay with my hip hurting? But no, I'm just kidding. But it is like the joy of my life to teach yoga and to bring it to people, but really for people to have that experience that they create for themselves. I am just a vessel there saying some words, hopefully to help create some kind of container where people can move through whatever they're going through emotionally, mentally, or just physically. I structure my classes in a way that I have what's sometimes called a Dharma talk at the beginning, where I try to root it in yoga philosophy concepts. So the yamas, the niyamas, a term from the Gita, something like that. And the reason I do that is because they are the most simple concepts. It's the study of yoga and all of this can seem so overwhelming and so esoteric and so serious. And there's a lot of joy and play and fun to be had. And also it's quite easy to understand the concepts if you just relate them to our lives. So that's what I try to do. And I'm glad it worked in that class. I'm happy to talk about it more.
Yeah, I mean, we can dive into it fully throughout our conversation.
Totally.
But I did want to give you credit because I've been practicing for about 15 years. And it's very much in the Western sense because I know that yoga is so much deeper and has beautiful cultural roots. And what we often experience in the West is almost a watered down version, and it's reduced to exercise when really it's this meditative practice that's so much deeper. But how did you get into yoga in the first place? What was your path?
Oh, such a good question. I guess to root this conversation, I'll say I'm Indian American. So my parents immigrated from India in the 80s to California, which is where I was born and raised. And I think people have a misconception that, oh, you're Indian, that's why. But I didn't grow up doing yoga. I did grow up going to our version of a Hindu Sunday school in which, as a kid, you learn prayers and chants. But as you grow up, Hindus are like a non-conversion and ultimately kind of monotheistic religion, but it's really based in a lot of spiritual concepts. So as you get older, you are talking about the things like the Gita and a lot of Vedic philosophy and stuff in which yoga has its roots as well. So I learned that, but I mean, there's not a lot of teenagers that are like stoked to be going to Sunday school. And I think I dropped off in high school. But I think the way it set me up, though, was that I grew up in the Bay Area, which is a very culturally diverse place, lots of immigrants, and really strong ties to culture. So my best friends in high school are Persian, Indian, whatever. We all did arts and stuff within our culture. And so I did classical Indian singing for most of my life growing up, and then I did Bollywood dance competitively for many years.
I would love to get into that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that I even did competitively in college, which is a whole other scene that I'm happy to talk about. But all this to say, movement had always been a really big part of my life, and my mom is very spiritual. She's very learned. I didn't grow up, I wouldn't say in a super religious house, but Hinduism is also a very cultural religion. We celebrate Diwali. We celebrate a lot of festivals. And my mom also would teach at Sunday school and stuff. So I had a lot of like influence. And I found yoga. The first yoga class I ever went to was I went to school at UC San Diego. I was a sophomore, and we had rec classes that you could take for free. This is like so dated information. I hope people don't use these terms anymore, but there used to be like a freshman 15 thing, and I really went hard. I went to school in San Diego. Our dining hall was Mexican food, and it was amazing. So I was like, I need to get into a workout regime. And yeah, so I was like, oh, yoga. I didn't really think of it as working out, but I was like, let me try this. And then that was also at the kind of advent of a lot of these current hot yoga franchises that were starting. So that was how I started. And then I got super lucky. I graduated college. I moved back home with my parents, and a yoga studio was opening up in my hometown. And I just saw it and went. And I was 21. I did not have the kind of like mental gravitas to like appreciate the depths of yoga, but I immediately, like the teacher and the owner of the studio, I was like, oh, something is special here. And so cut to 15 plus years later, and that's where I've done all my certifications, and I've traveled with them. I now teach teacher training there, so it's very full circle. But I think yoga and any kind of mindful practice comes to you when you're ready. You can't really force it. So for a long time, it was just yoga asana. That was what I was focused on, strength. I had no flexibility and all of that. And then it really started to get deeper for me in my mid-20s. And then it really, as I said, when I say full circle, like studying for my 200 hour, it was all this stuff I had learned as a kid that was coming back. And I had, at that point, I had studied some philosophy in college. I was really interested in Buddhism and stuff. So it kind of all started to make sense. And then also very plainly, like, I don't know if this is a thing, but, you know, everyone has that reputation in their friend group, and I was always the one that was like the quote therapist, like the person that people came to. And so it kind of felt like, oh, this is where maybe that plays for me. And then it's been since then.
That's amazing. Even to have that sort of awakening in your mid-20s is early, because I think some folks, they don't come to, like, in some ways, like a therapeutic practice until much later in their lives. So you're a decade and a half in. That's pretty impressive.
Thank you. I mean, I think, yes. But it did have its, I don't want to say pitfalls, but I remember my friends in their 20s would be like, oh, you're such a bore. But there was something deeper always. As I said, my mom's a very deep studier, practitioner of meditation. And so I think I always had this like inner desire to learn more. And yeah, it clicked early for me. But to your point about kind of the westernization, I remember speaking to a friend that I'd grown up with. I'd known him since I was born. His family is really big in like the Hindu Sunday school stuff. And I remember him saying to me, oh, so it took you having a white lady explain it to you to then care about Hinduism. It was such a like interesting way to be like, is that what happened? And in a way, yeah, that's true. But I'm born and raised in the United States, and I think like it has to come from you, but it also has to come through vessels and teachers and people who make it make sense for you. Yes. And for me, those are my two teachers who, yes, are white women and the most knowledgeable, practiced people I know. It worked out.
Yeah. I think the right teachers find you when you're ready, or you find them.
Yes.
Like the orbits that you are in eventually overlap when the timing is meant to be, and it may not look the way you thought, but that was how it was supposed to be.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I feel really similarly because I grew up dancing hula, but not from a really young age, from age 16 in Minnesota, where I grew up. My father's side is Hawaiian, but I grew up as part of the diaspora of the native Hawaiian people leaving the islands for many reasons, affordability and other opportunities elsewhere. So I've always felt this sense of like, how do I connect with my roots in the most respectful way, learning from like a primary source, a primary teacher, a primary kumu, knows what they're talking about. And I felt lucky that I found a Hawaiian community in the Twin Cities who was very open-minded and embracing people who had an interest in learning about Hawaiian culture, and their hearts were in the right place. But it wasn't how I expected it to look. And then even coming into a yoga practice, I always knew that there was something more to it, but I didn't want to like culturally appropriate. And I've done a 200-hour teacher training as well, But it was in such a corporate setting that I don't even want to call myself a registered yoga teacher. I'm like a movement guide. I think that's really what I am in relation to the true practice. How do you strike the balance between honoring the true essence of yoga and guiding classes in a modern day Western setting? Because being a student in your class, I was like, whoa, I have never seen this done so well.
Oh,
it's so rare. And yeah, I've done a lot of yoga. So like, I was like, she exists.
Oh
She's a unicorn.
Oh, that is so kind. That is my purpose as a teacher. So for you to say that is truly, I'll have to go really reflect on that later, because that's the whole reason I did 200-hour training similarly. And I was like, I didn't do it to teach, I just did it to learn. And then I did 300-hour, which is a much deeper whatever, and you come out of that with 500. And at that point, I was like, I should probably start teaching, just because you have all this stuff. But really, when I honed in on what my, I don't know, brand, what is your ethos as a teacher, it was that. It's mixing these two things, meeting the modern world with a lens and a rootedness in cultural practice. But I think it is a balance. I'm sure there are teachers who think I get it wrong. First of all, there's a real lack of Indian teachers of yoga, which is really sad. It is something that has come from us and has completely changed hands. And not only that, Indian teachers are declined opportunities all the time because maybe they have an accent or whatever. And I see this on my Instagram and stuff. And it's just, so there's that. I follow a fair amount of Indian American or Indian global teachers. And there's some that have a very strong line of you should not be playing music and pop music and all this stuff. So I think everyone interprets it in their own way. I think for me, the honest answer is I just am true to myself. I am someone who is very proud of being Indian, and I love my culture, and I think there's a lot of issues with it, and there's a lot of things that in yoga and in patriarchal systems that can be associated with like Indian culture that are wrong, and there's a lot of Indian teachers that have been wrong. And I also grew up in a very cultured but modern household. You know, my parents were very cool in that way. Of course, like expectations of grades, some of the stereotypical stuff. But I think for me, I have a very broad sense of music. I love pop culture. I'm always kidding around. I work for Instagram. So there's all these parts, and it would be not authentic to me to teach in a way that's like full Sanskrit Indian, and it also is absolutely not authentic to me to teach in a way that strips that out. So I think for me that's how it came to be, is like this is just a reflection of who I am, which I realize is not that like helpful if you're trying to figure out how to balance it. But I do find I have a responsibility as well. So teaching in the Bay Area to the clientele there is quite different than the clientele in Hawaii. Hawaii is interesting too because there's a whole sense of cultural appropriation, which is also we are on stolen land, right? So you have this whole other aspect to it. And we're doing a practice that is not, you know what I mean? In a way, it makes the Venn diagram much smaller. There's a lot of shared appreciation here and reverence for cultural practices, which is so wonderful. And I'm the only Indian teacher that I know of. And that's not to say I'm the only Indian teacher. I'm sure there are others. I just haven't gotten to know them, and et cetera. And so I do feel a responsibility to keep up with Sanskrit pronunciation. I bring a lot of Indian music into my classes. I root in yoga philosophy because that is important. And I always say this, asana is 1/8 of what yoga is. Yoga is about liberation from suffering. It's about yoking of the mind. There's so much more. So yeah, have some fun in your class. It's okay. In order to be able to have a good experience in a class, I think a teacher has to provide a real authentic space. So that's how I try to approach it. Some days I just play Indian classical music because that's the mood I'm in. I'm just more like, I don't want to talk that much. I'm more in this. And some days it's a lot of Bad Bunny, a lot of days. Sometimes I'm gabbing about how much heated rivalry meant to me and that love is so important and that's my tie-in to like loving kindness. Yes. But it's all real. So whether it's right or wrong, and I'm sure I make mistakes all the time, but like that is real for me.
I mean, it resonated for me. Even in the class, the most recent class that I went to of yours, you talked about joy as resistance,
Yes.
especially given what's happening
Yes.
today. And I was like, yeah, what we're learning on our mats gives us those transferable skills of patience and love towards others, towards ourselves, despite the chaos of the world.
Yes.
How can we bring yoga into our interactions in traffic, at work, all the things? Do you want to speak to that? Because I think you did a really beautiful job of saying it in that class, and that stuck with me too.
Oh, I'm so out. Yes. I am not someone who shies away from what's going on in the world, right? That I feel very strongly about. If you're teaching yoga or any kind of practice around this, we cannot ignore. This is not about self-love anymore. Like, we are in a world in which we are seeing things that happen that are fundamentally opposed to the principles of yoga. So by practicing yoga, we must be aware of these things. And what I believe is that self-care and all these things are very important so that we can be the best versions of ourselves to be of service in whatever way that is. And I often say that could be being of service to your pet, to your partner, to your community, to whatever that looks like for you. Joy is a really interesting part of that because I think there's sometimes some guilt around feeling it right now, or it's like I can only feel joy if I turn my mind off to everything going on. Joy as a form of resistance, I think, is very true because all of this can drain that away from you to the point where you're not being actually useful, right? Or of service. You're just kind of spiraling in your own self-pity after a certain point, or on behalf of humanity, which is very understandable. But I think if we can cultivate joy in these moments through moving our bodies, it is all so that when we are out in the world, we can cultivate joy in those moments that present obstacles. So I always say what we're doing on the mat is really just so that the second we leave here, you bring that, whether it's the breath to movement, whether it's, oh my gosh, I am stuck in this warrior two for so long. When is she going to cue me out? But that's what it's like. That's what life is like sometimes. You are stuck in a thing. The only way out is through. So we can't really turn away from it. We have to learn how to literally breathe in it, find some comfort or discomfort in it, try to find some joy, knowing that it will change, right? Like every pose changes, the flow keeps going. Every wave changes, the ocean keeps moving. The world changes all the time. So I really believe in an asana type of yoga practice. That is what we're cultivating. And you have to call it out for students because it's hard to connect that sometimes.
Yes.
You're like, I'm just here to do my sun salutations, which is amazing, but what are you actually doing? You're practicing. We call it a practice so that next time, as you said, there's road rage, you're like, okay. Or next time something crazy happens, you're like, okay, cool. I'm good with me so I can go do X.
Mm-hmm. I love this so much, and I'm glad the conversation is going into this space because there's something about we weren't meant to come into the world and just live like perfect lives. We're meant to learn through being in relationship with people, with our emotions, with experiences. And I feel like yoga, like a 1-hour class, you're in pigeon pose and your hips are just screaming and it's hard, but you're there for like 2 minutes and you're like, okay, my body is telling me something. My emotions are telling me something. The discomfort is here, but I'm going to sit with it and accept it and let it move through my physical body.
Yes.
So that by the time I leave, I know that I'm capable of releasing it.
Yes.
And that connection, it took me years to realize it, but when you called it out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. And it's also very similar to the Aloha teachings that my mentor, Uncle Pono Shim, had shared with me and many of his other students is like these Aloha values that you're learning. And it's not necessarily prescriptive. It's this very fluid way of like, how do we experience Aloha in our lives? So that when we're presented with challenge and good things, we can react appropriately and with love.
Exactly.
And I was like, there is so much alignment here of these practices. And it just really stood out to me. And I want to, again, thank you for that. But I would love to learn a little bit about Sanskrit. How did you start studying? Can you give us a few words that are related to yoga that we could know how to actually pronounce?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So Sanskrit is what they call a quote dead language in the way Latin is, right? It's not spoken, but it's the root of so many languages. Hindi, Urdu, many Middle Eastern and Indian languages root from Sanskrit. So candidly, I don't speak any Indian language, which is a shame, but I understand Tamil, that's my mother tongue, and I understand a bit of Hindi, and I can like converse at a high level. Yoga, all the poses are in Sanskrit because yoga is obviously an ancient practice. It comes from that language. I think what happened was it started with my name. My name is Devi, Devi. Goddess pose is Devi Asana. So I would hear it in all these classes and it's pronounced Devi Asana. That's how teachers always pronounce it. Devi Asana, Devi Asana. Once I made the connection, oh my God, because they say Devi Asana, goddess pose. I'm like, okay, ma'am, no. And I think that's kind of what got my systems moving and being like, oh, everything. And I was pronouncing everything just the way I learned it. So I would say Chaturanga Dandasana and Anjaneyasana, which is, it's okay. But I saw this reel that was super informative. It was like in ballet, you call things forte, whatever. It's like cool. You're supposed to. Why in yoga are we like, let's call it a downward dog instead of Adho Mukha Svanasana? It's because someone decided that was too hard to pronounce, and so they removed it. And obviously being in Hawaii, this is a very tender topic with language erasure and stuff, but I also understand Sanskrit's a very hard language. It's very hard to pronounce. The consonants are very different than English. So in my 200-hour training, we had to test out with Sanskrit and English, which was very useful and very important to my teachers, meaning you had to be able to identify things in Sanskrit. And I had a huge advantage because I've heard Hindi my whole life. I've heard these languages my whole life, the derivatives. So the pronunciation is second nature for me. When I started teacher training, both here in Hawaii and in California, that's what I teach: pronunciation, Sanskrit, and then cultural appropriation. And we go through like the most popular poses, we break it down, we talk about why it's important, and then we break out into groups and we just practice. And I think it's very important. It's like I grew up in California, we call things like Los Gatos. It's not how it's supposed to be pronounced. We all do this, it's okay. Can we be better? Yeah. So that's why I try to integrate it into my classes as much as I can, and people then visually can hear Urva Dhanurasana and see you in wheel, and they start to associate it the same way. People are smart.
And I realized, would you be able to give a little overview of what is yoga? Because we're so on the same wavelength, we dove in really fast. Yeah. But just like an overview for folks who may not have ever practiced.
You know what's so funny is I find that to be one of the hardest questions to ever, because even in my teacher trainings, it's kind of a contemplation of what is yoga, you know, and it can be different things for different people. To me, I think yoga is fundamentally this practice of liberation. I say that meaning of the physical body, of the mind from its patterns, of people from suffering. There's many ways it goes, but I think when we look at the concepts under yoga, the yamas and niyamas, things like ahimsa, non-violence, aparigraha, non-grasping, they're leading us to this point of moksha, liberation, in that we are able to move through the world as humans, we are humans, but without these things that plague us, right? So our mind patterns, our ruminations, there's these things called the kleshas that are known as like the poisons, and that's like wanting and all that. So the ability to free ourselves from all of that. And ideally, it's the freedom from suffering for ourselves and for others. And I think in a good yoga practice, even if it's a 1-hour class, as I said, to like really fun music, you're sweating, there's some moment of liberation from maybe the thought that you came in with that was bugging you. I always say this, the goal with meditation is not to have a fully clear mind. It's to be aware of what's going on in the mind. I would say that at my stage in meditation, there are people far more accomplished and sages who are at a much higher level. But for me, I have a monkey mind, thinking about things all the time, and I'm a classic overthinker. So the goal is just awareness of that. And so if you can find a little bit of liberation from the thing that you came in thinking about, the chore you have, the kind of expectation of what your body's supposed to look like in this pose, that is the practice. I think also changes with age, with cultural setting. As you did, I started practicing now probably closer to 20 years ago. And at that point, I mean, I was doing it for the right reasons because I was like, I think yoga will help my mind. It was just the thought that it may, right?
Yeah.
And then also for increasing flexibility and mobility, the physical benefits of yoga are bar none. But yeah, it changes. That's why I love having teachers who are older and more experienced, because there's just wisdom in life that comes in the practice.
Do you have any specific moments from like classes or your trainings or just in life that stand out to you where you're like, this is yoga? Or just highlights from this practice?
Well, definitely this is one of them. I think a couple things come to mind. One is a more vulnerable moment and one is a more class moment. So I've always been, as I said, an overthinker. I've always dealt with some level of anxiety, as many people do. And a couple years ago, it got really bad. And for the first time in my life, I was really like, this is overpowering. There was so much negative self-talk that was associated with that. And the reason it got to that point is because I was considering whether to take a more kind of intense intervention medicine, essentially. And I'd always put that away because I was like, no, I live in Hawaii, I do yoga, I'm like the people come to me for this. So there was a whole lot of inner story of being like, this is a failure. What do you mean you might go on anxiety medication? And that was such a clarifying moment for me because I realized, first of all, there was no way I would be able to notice what was going on with my mind and body had I not had this practice. I think if it was me 10 years ago, I would have just kept going and been like, let me just Band-Aid fix the things, you know. Oh, my skin's breaking out. Let me go deal with that. Oh, my stomach hurts. Let me deal with that. Oh, I'll just have a glass of wine. That'll help. Like that kind of stuff. I had such acute awareness that there was something else that was guiding me, meaning ruling me, that was not me. I could see it. I was like, this is not me. Something else is in charge of me right now. And also, I had someone wiser than me say, all those things that you do, meditation, yoga, all those things, they are tools to give you the discernment to realize that this could help you. This is another tool. And so it really was this reframe where I was like, oh yeah, this is a practice of yoga for myself, of having to let go of my own ego and my own judgments, not anybody else. You know, I have so many friends and family who have had various mental health struggles, and I'm extremely compassionate and involved with friends around these issues. I think it was just for myself that I was like, so what, now I'm going to be the yoga teacher who's on Lexapro? You know?
Yeah.
And guess what? I am, and it's great. So I think that was like a big, and also just realizing that you change, you grow, you change. The tools you need are different. And yoga's not there to cure anxiety. I think that was a big reframe for me. So that was one. And then I think moving to Hawaii, I've been here, officially living here for about 2.5 years, but I'd been spending a lot of time here before that, practicing at the studio that I teach at and that you practice at. And when I first started teaching, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm teaching. But it was like some class would have 2 people, whatever. I think there was a moment not that long ago where it actually may have been the class you were in, where I had you and a couple people. Yes, there was another woman there who similarly said to me, the way that you're talking about this is making so much sense.
Yes.
And this is why I'm here. And that was like, okay, then I'm doing the right thing. So I'm not even trying to, this is not me faking you out or something. It's genuinely, I was like, the thing I have always set out to do is happening now. And that feels really good. And that people are seeking me out, not because I'm no wiser than anybody in any of my classes, but because for whatever reason, the vessel is meeting the right audience.
That's so funny that you said that, because I remember that other woman coming up and she was like, this is so validating. The way you taught the class hit home, hit her values. And she's like, I'm sticking with this studio because the values of the studio align with her. And so cool that it all happened all at once.
I know. I'm in a very privileged situation in that I have a very good job. I've been working for a long time, and so I get to teach yoga as truly a passion. It's what I love. I do not do it for money. I'm in the privileged position that I donate the money I make from yoga to causes in Hawaii and things that matter to me in the community. But I think even in that, there's still some ego right? When you're a teacher. But you want people to like your class. You want people to like you. You want people to feel connected. And taking out the monetary stuff, it was like, oh, okay, this is working now,
Yes.
So I feel really grateful, and I feel really grateful to Summer, who owns our studio, who really was like, do whatever you want, and has given me a lot of freedom to teach the way I like. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So in each interview I ask, what makes your heart beat? And it doesn't necessarily have to be everything we already talked about.
I know. There's so many things. I mean, there's really simple things. I would say coming out of the last couple of weeks, the sun. Truly love her so much. All I really need is like sun, some good treats with my friends, and I feel so happy. I'm really lucky in my friendships, and they're very long-standing. And with my family, really, those sound cheesy, but yeah. And then a good show. I'm a pop culture junkie, so I love an episode of Summer House. Like, I'm quite simple, I think, in the things that make my heart beat in that way. A good slice of pizza, a great glass of wine. But fundamentally, it's really the people. Yoga brings me that. Also, anything I can do to be around the people I love is like what makes my heart beat. It's like so cheesy.
But it's not. It's so rooted in reality, too.
And I think we've all experienced collectively what it's like to not have those. So that's really all that matters.
I'm also a huge fan of your t-shirt.
Oh, yes.
It says, can you describe what's on your shirt?
Yes, I am wearing a Heated Rivalry shirt. That should really change my life. Talk about joy. And it has our favorite hockey players kissing on the rink. And it's like a vintage tee that I'm coming out of 2 weeks of the flu and an ear infection. I really don't remember ordering the shirt. It like showed up at my door, and I was like, there's no receipt. I have no idea. I must have done it on Etsy when I was like in the delirium.
Everything.
Yeah, exactly. But things that bring you joy. Like, I really think that's what's so important. It doesn't have to be these like monumental. I heard this thing once that was like, you actually get more joy planning a vacation than going on it, because it's just the idea, like such simple things can bring you joy if you just let yourself enjoy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I loved Heated Rivalry. I kind of want to watch it again. The character development and the love story, and
I think I've watched it. I can't really recall the amount of times, but I think we also are all craving sweet and happy endings and joy. You don't have to go far to see things that are not that. And so if it makes you happy to scroll and send your friends dumb reels, do it. It doesn't have to be like the most, oh, I got joy because I went on a 10-mile run. Like, that's great too. But taking it back to yoga, when I'm like, just try the pose. If you fall, it's 3 inches. Who cares? Don't let fear stop you.
definitely.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, what is on the horizon for you, whether it's professionally or something fun coming up? What's next?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I'm excited to continue in the yoga world, teaching teacher trainings and growing that. Professionally, I get to do really cool stuff with my job. It's a corporate job, so of course there's trade-offs, but it keeps me engaged, and especially with the world we're in today, and I'm really grateful for that, because living on an island really far from my family and stuff, and from the hub of tech, and I work in tech, it can feel isolating, so it's nice that I have a job that keeps me like... But what I'm excited about, if I'm being 100% honest, which I should be, I'm hopeful for love coming into my life. So that's what's next. We're going to say it out loud. It's going to happen.
2026, 2027. It's the new wave.
It's the new wave. Year of the fire horse. It's really beautiful what all these things, what joy gives you too, is the relationships with all the various aspects of your life, and I think partnership is one of those. So
absolutely,
you know.
So if you're listening and you're really resonating with Devi,
yes,
she's here.
I'm here. Okay, DMs are open.
Everyone deserves to receive and give love.
Yes,
and so I think that's so relatable.
Yeah.
In all forms.
Yeah. And like modern dating is extremely hard. And if I think about where it's hardest to find joy for me, it's not with work, it's not with yoga, it's with that aspect. And so I think focusing on that, helping change the relationship I have with that whole sphere of my life will be good. But yeah, someone can go ahead and make a case.
This has been such a fun conversation.
So great.
I'm hopeful that we'll continue chatting about all sorts of things over time. But anything you want to leave listeners with, or resources about yoga, anything of that nature, where they can find you?
Oh my gosh. Yes, you can find me on Instagram, Devi Sakti Yoga. I teach every Sunday, yoga to the palms, kaka'ako. I do events and stuff. I think this is such a random sign off, but I think if I could leave people with one thing, if they're thinking about this yoga, cultural appropriation, all this stuff, just open your mind to more than what you hear, and be open to like going on Spotify and looking up Indian ragas and be like, oh, that's cool. Or whatever it is you're doing, whether it's hula, whether it's whatever sport or interest or hobby, I think just staying a sense of openness really will bring so many things that you didn't expect. And like, I feel more and more that in our world now, there's a lot of external talk that's divisive. We have more in common than we don't. So just stay open, have conversations, and be willing to be wrong, and then great things happen.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of this.
Of course.
I'm also thinking about how, as teachers, we might close a yoga class.
Yes.
Is there a way that you often close the class that we could close this with?
Absolutely. I can say a very small line. It's a chant you probably heard. Just Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. May all beings be free from suffering. And I end my classes just saying Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi, which is peace and Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will catch you on the next episode. Aloha.
Thank you, Molly.